Spoken about much publicized budget speech that was delayed or whatever you want to call it, but then presented yesterday again. Remember, this is a proposed budget speech, still has to be passed through. And a man who became an instant superstar on the show, Mr. Dawie Roodt, Economist. Good morning, Dawie.
How did that happen? Good morning to you.
So, you know what? From the last time, you just shoot very straight. Now, from the budget speech yesterday, we saw some numbers come out. There are 7.9 million taxpayers in South Africa. Okay? Tell me if my maths is correct here. There are 28 million grant recipients. So if you work that out, it kind of works out that every taxpayer supports 3.5 grant recipients. And
It's a little bit. No, it's not completely right.
no,
So
but just if you
yeah.
average it out, right?
No, that's also not right.
Okay, please correct me, sir.
All right.
Please.
Okay, there are 65 million people in South Africa, more or less.
Mm.
And anybody that touches money in South Africa pays tax.
Yeah.
So that means everybody pays tax, but everybody doesn't pay the same kind of tax. There are different kinds of tax.
Mm.
The tax that you are referring to are personal income taxes,
Yeah.
which is important. My apologies. Which is the single most important revenue source to the Minister of Finance. That contributes about 40% to the total budget. Now, if you look at the numbers, there are 245,000 individuals in South Africa, for example, that pay a third of total personal income taxes. And there are something like 1.5 million individuals that pay something like 70% of total personal income taxes. So, but there are many other taxes. Personal income tax is the most important one, but the second most important one is value-added tax, and everybody pays a value-added tax, more or less, and then followed by corporate taxes. But companies don't pay taxes really. They shift the total tax burden to the individual in the end. But I think the point you want to get to is that you're right. There are, in fact, 30 million people getting an income from the state every month because there are 2 million civil servants as well, while there are less than 15 million people working in the private sector, which means then that there are more than 2 people getting an income from the state for every 1 person that works in the private sector. And we know the private sector is the only real productive side of the economy. Or let's just put it differently. If you calculate the redistributional impact of the fiscus in South Africa, and what I mean by that, who's doing the paying and who's doing the getting, or who's getting the revenue from the Minister of Finance, then the South African fiscus, or the budget then, is the most redistributive budget in the world. So the guys doing the paying are not the guys getting the money back from the Minister of Finance. But of course, there are many ways of looking at it.
So basically, I mean, converting those grant recipients to taxpayers, which is basically giving people jobs, that should be the priority, isn't it?
Without a doubt, certainly without a doubt. And the only way that we can achieve that is through economic growth. And we're not going to grow the economy, and the Minister of Finance actually also agrees with me. He's penciled in 1.9% economic growth for this year and the years thereafter, more or less. I don't think we're going to get to 1.9%. So the Minister of Finance even hasn't got confidence in his own economic policies because, 1.9% economic growth, which I don't believe will be achieved, is certainly not something that anybody should be proud of.
And Dawie, this 0.5% increase in VAT from an initial 2, is this a win or is this still a loss? I know it still has to be approved in Parliament. Do you think it will be approved or not?
It seems to me as if the other political parties are not going to support this. Is it a good thing? Let's just talk a little bit about VAT. VAT is all taxes are always bad, but some taxes are worse than other taxes. VAT is one of those less bad taxes. So if there's an increase in VAT, I would certainly support that in the current environment in South Africa, but then we must cut back on other worse taxes. And worse taxes are, for example, company taxes or corporate taxes. So if there's an increase in VAT and the same decrease in company taxes, I would certainly support that. But what is happening now is that there's an increase in VAT and, by the way, a substantial increase in personal income taxes as well. People don't really pick that up, and we should talk about that. And that means that the state is getting more money, and if you give politicians more money, they spend more money. And the only way that you can get politicians who spend less money is simply not to give them money. And that is where we are at the moment. And that's part of the reason why everybody is jumping around like a bunch of cats on hot and a roof, because we've run out of money, quite literally. And now they're starting to look at really improving the efficiency of the state and see whether we have to spend money on all these things that they are spending money on. So the VAT increase, no. I'm not in favor of that in the current environment. What we must do is to cut back on state spending, and that hasn't really happened yet.
So, do you think in Parliament, where do you think this is going to end up? Because now they've presented another budget speech. If Parliament doesn't approve it, then are we back here in a month again? Where does this all end up?
Well, there's some good in it and some bad in it as well. All of a sudden, everybody's a fiscal expert.
Yeah.
Everybody's talking about the budget, which is a good thing. Right. And all of a sudden, you will find all the politicians, because the ANC hasn't got the majority anymore, politicians are all going to be fiscal experts as well. And they're going to debate this and that and all of that, which is not a bad thing. Unfortunately, what is probably going to happen as well is that people that are certainly not experts now are going to demand all sort of unreasonable things as well. And that the whole thing, so I'm afraid this whole thing can really become quite messy as well. But maybe it's not a bad thing to get it out in the open. I think what eventually will happen, there will be some sort of compromise, and I will really be surprised if this VAT increase actually goes through. I think eventually the ANC will simply have to accept that the majority of the other political parties simply will not support a VAT increase. But that is interesting, because it becomes applicable, I think the 1st of May, VAT will kick in any event. And then what happens if thereafter they reject the budget? So that's an interesting question. I think this is more a legal guy that should be answering these kind of questions. I'm really not sure.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Dawie, for your insight once again. Always.
My pleasure.
You're a breath of fresh air, so thank you very much. So
my pleasure, and thank you.
Ciao. So that VAT increase, by the way, it's 0.5% this year, and then another 0.5% next year. All right. Whether it goes through, who knows? Time will tell. That is your budget speech. That was Dawie Roodt, the most straight-talking economist we have.